Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to colleagues who are joining us from all around the world. My name is Daniel Feeks. I'm the head of the Implementation Support Unit of the Biological Weapons Convention in Geneva. Thanks for joining us today for this webinar on assistance, response and preparedness, the issues that will be covered by the meeting of experts number 4. This webinar will run from now for approximately 90 minutes. You hopefully have all received the agenda, so you will have seen the list of people who will be speaking and presenting in the next 90 minutes. We have some rules for the webinar. If my colleagues can just quickly show the next screen, you'll all hopefully be familiar. Those of you in particular who attended the first webinar that we organized a couple of weeks ago, please can you have your cameras switched off? Can you keep your microphones muted throughout the webinar? Due to the time constraints, we can't give the floor individually to participants to ask their questions directly. So if you do have any questions to our speakers, please can you send them through the chat function, and you can send those to the entity known as host and presenter there. All questions will be submitted privately, and if you could indicate to whom you would like to address your question. This webinar is going to be recorded, or is being recorded, for those who are unable to attend, and with the presenters' consent, we will also make their presentations available on our website. And finally, just to note, this is the second in a series of 5 informal webinars that we're organizing over the coming weeks, covering each of the upcoming meetings of experts. You can see the dates of the future webinars that will be coming, the 16th of November for the one on MX3, the 18th for the one on MX5, and finally the 24th of November for the webinar on MX1, all taking place at the same time. That's 1300 hours Central European time. So that's it for me. Just like to say thanks to all of our presenters, thanks to all of you who are joining from around the world. We have just over 200 participants today, and thanks to all of my colleagues working the back end of all of this on the technical side, organizing this WebEx meeting as well. So I would now like to hand over to the moderator for this meeting and the newly appointed chair of MX4, Ambassador Kuzmanovska from North Macedonia. Ambassador, good to see you, and over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, everyone, for joining. First of all, thank you almost 200 participants that are joining our webinar. Let me briefly introduce myself. I'm the newly appointed chair of MX4. I'm Ambassador Elena Kuzmanovska-Biondic in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Ministry of North Macedonia, and I deal with issues of disarmament and arms control. First of all, let me start by thanking once again the Eastern European Group for my nomination and all of you for supporting my work as a chair of the meeting of experts on assistance, response and preparedness. I'm very privileged to work with a very experienced group of people and colleagues, and very privileged to be chaired by the able guidance of our 2020 MSP chair, Ambassador Mailu of Kenya. I also like at the very beginning to share my deep appreciation to Japan and the Implementation Support Unit for co-organizing this webinar and for the work they have done so far. And I strongly believe that it is a very timely initiative that will enable our discussions on the topics to be considered under MX4. In that regard, I would especially like to thank all of the speakers in today's webinar. Like all other MXs, MX4 touches very critical issues, and we believe that the international community has never been more aware of the need to be prepared for and respond effectively to disease outbreaks. In the scenario of a possible deliberate of disease as a weapon, this need will be amplified simply because the challenges that need to be tackled will be far greater. This COVID-19 pandemic that we're facing is surely unprecedented in its magnitude, and it has impacted all our lives. Many of us have lost loved ones, and many of us are working on the front line responding to the global crisis. We are very thankful to all the healthcare workers looking after those who have contracted the virus, thankful to the scientists working on a successful vaccine, and also thankful to all other essential workers helping our societies function. While COVID-19 is pandemic and public health crisis, it will certainly impact the discussions that will happen at the future BWC meetings. We hope there will be valuable transferable lessons from this pandemic that will be with relevance to the Convention and particularly, but not only, to Article 7 of the Convention. At the review conference in 2016, important lessons were drawn from the Ebola virus disease outbreak, and it was a disease of natural origin. However, state parties and relevant international organizations looked at the experience in addressing that situations and drew transferable suggestions, practices, and lessons for a possible situation that might in the future fall within the purview of the Convention. This current pandemic certainly teaches us that being prepared, being ready to assess, to contain, and to effectively respond to a disease outbreak is essential for the states and must be in place. This certainly has to be done in cooperation between the state parties and all relevant international organizations within their respective mandates. It is my sincere hope that this extremely challenging situation in which the current pandemic has placed all of us will be looked at while we consider how a very important provision of the Convention is Article 7, which actually talks about assistance and solidarity among state parties and its need to be made operational. MX4 offers a privileged forum to address these very issues and to provide food for thought on the making Article 7 operational. I hope that our discussion leads to broad support by state parties for a set of concrete proposals to be considered at the 9th Review Conference. I believe that this conference is crucial and we all have to arrive prepared very well when it is going to happen. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Article 7 is basically very simple and very open provision, and message is straightforward and clear and very important at the same time. It means that a state in distress can ask for and should receive assistance from other parties to the Convention. On the other hand, the Convention is rather silent on how this article is made operational, and there are divergent views on how it can be achieved. But there is a broad consensus among state parties that there is a need to move forward in this area. There is also wide support of some key steps that need to be taken in order to achieve that goal. My predecessor, Mr. Usman Iqbal Jaddin of Pakistan, stressed the need to leverage the large degree of convergence and wide cross-support that exists among state parties regarding many of the proposals currently on the table. I would therefore suggest, and while of course considering all topics being discussed under MX4, to focus on these issues and on that broad support existing for them. After me, you will hear from Mr. Nakai that there are several proposals that could bring substantive progress in the area of Article 7. I will therefore not further elaborate on them now. Overall, MX4 in 2018 and 2019 saw very active and constructive discussions, and we can all build on them. I remain hopeful that at the next meeting of state parties and at the 9th Review Conference, the remaining questions relating to those proposals can be addressed and progress can be made towards making Article 7 operational, and state parties ready to provide assistance and respond effectively if a need arises. It is my sincere hope that what the world is currently experiencing will give us renewed strength and motivation to take up the discussion on assistance, response, and preparedness within MX4 and to accelerate progress on key areas for the consideration of the 9th Review Conference. I look forward to working with all of you on this important issue, and I would like to pass the word to Mr. Mikai to give us a brief introductory word. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Kuzmanovska, and my heartfelt congratulations for your assumption of MX4 chair at this important juncture. And BWC must produce tangible and concrete outcome in assistance, response, and preparedness for disease outbreak in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic. And it is MX4 where we are discussing those important issues. Your role is of particular importance, and I can assure you that Japan is more than willing to cooperate and collaborate with you to fulfill your duty. And my sincere appreciation for ISU once again to organize this challenging webinar in such a short notice manner. This is the second one following the MX2 webinar on October 29th. And I believe this webinar is also very useful in facilitating the converging discussions towards a successful outcome of the review conference. And also I'd like to thank Dr. Sanga for his very informative pre-recorded presentation French. Dr. Zanger has a very unique experience on BWCs, and I am particularly grateful that he can share his experience, expertise prior to the MX4 meeting. Incidentally, some of you may wonder why MX2 chair I am in this webinar. In view of the fact that it was just yesterday that Ambassador Kuzmanovska assumed that role, Japan agreed to facilitate the preparation for this webinar on MX4. And upon her request, I had the pleasure to co-moderate this webinar together with the ambassador. In my remark, as I did in the MX2 webinar, allow me to briefly reflect what we have discussed in the previous MX4 and remind you what proposals are on the table in order to facilitate converging discussions in the coming MX4 based upon previous findings and proposals. We had two good discussions in 2018 and 19. Both discussions are truly diverse and enriching, and we had experience in-depth and constructive exchange of views and expertise among our experts on all topics to be considered. Numerous working papers are presented for our consideration. In MX4s, what we address is the serious challenge of the implementations facing the implementation of Article 7, particularly lack of any mechanism of operationalizations. In MX4s, there are strong and cross-regional support for the need to develop mechanisms, framework, procedure for the operationalizations. And we have also heard a variety of different views on possible modalities. In this regard, we have also discussed intensively how best we can take advantage of existing relevant resources and mechanisms without duplications, or whether a specific particular mechanism is conceivable in the nature of these provisions. And national capacity. As we can tell from our experience of COVID-19, an effective response to outbreak always, first and foremost, is national endeavor. Therefore, in the MX, it is strongly noted that the effective response starts with securing and maintaining the national capability for surveillance, detections, diagnosis of, and response to the disease outbreak. And also the command and control. Command and control is stressed as an important crucial capability to ensure the effective coordination of national and international levels. Delegation restated the importance of capacity building in this regard. Japan is one of them, and we have organized a series of workshops to promote the capacity building of member states. each state parties must enhance their capacities to respond to the outbreaks. And we discuss what sort of international assistance is required. And also we discuss what we should do to receive or to prepare to receive such assistance. Preparedness. On preparedness, what is always reaffirmed is the importance to access of new technology and equipments in order to detect and counter the possible outbreak coming from a new developing biological pathogens. There's the brief outline of the previous discussion on MX4. And as Ambassador Kuzmarovskaya stressed, you may remember that there is a substantial convergence of views, cross-regional convergence of views on what we should do next. It is imperative for us to achieve concrete and tangible outcome in the coming review conference from the MX4 discussion. We are also fortunate to already have very good, promising, and practical proposals from several state parties, which can be the basis of such outcomes. Today, we are inviting those state parties to introduce their ideas and also their latest, the current status. I'm particularly grateful for them to squeeze the busy time to participate in this exercise. I'm convinced that this webinar is going to be very, very useful in facilitating to build up our discussion and help us to further converge our views towards a successful outcome of the review conference. Thank you very much indeed for your attention. And the microphone is back to you, Ambassador Kuzmarovskaya. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nakai. And once again, I would like to share my very deep gratitude to Japan for doing the substantial work so far and helping us organize this webinar, which I believe will provide very important information for the forthcoming MX4 session. So thank you once again. Now I would like all of us to proceed to the presentation and actually the topics of discussions that I believe will be debated thoroughly in the forthcoming MX4 meeting. And first on our agenda is the topic of defining a set of guidelines and formats to assist the state party required when submitting an application for assistance under Article 7. I would like to note that South Africa has done a lot of substantial work on this issue in the previous years. Their work started in the period from 2014 to 2016 when they developed these guidelines on information that would accompany a request for assistance pursuant to Article 7. Then they submitted a revised proposal at MX4 in 2018, and the discussion on this paper continued in 2018. It is important to note that this initiative has a widespread support among member states and other experts in this area, and it was seen that further discussions should be done to fine-tune this proposal and to address some remaining technical issues. Therefore, I would like to invite Ms. Melanie Rediar, the Chief Director of Non-Proliferation Department of Trade, Industry and Competition in South Africa, to give us her presentation. Melanie, please.
Thank you, Ambassador. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again, Ambassador, Mr. Nakai, and congratulations, Ambassador, on your appointment as chairperson of MX4. I wish you well in your deliberations during the MX4. And thank you also to the ISU for the arrangements for this webinar. I've been given the opportunity to brief this webinar on this important topic, and as you've elaborated, it is quite important now given the COVID-19 pandemic. as you've elaborated, South Africa has been for many years formulated proposals regarding the assistance and protection in terms of Article 7, with the first proposal being tabled in 2014. And after receiving positive support for our initial proposal, the working paper has been revisited several times. And we've taken consideration of the diverse views of all states parties. And we've revised the paper several times, and we've resubmitted the paper in 2015, again in the review conference in 2016. And the latest paper was submitted during the meeting of experts in 2018. And the current situation of COVID-19 that we faced with has stirred renewed interest in the proposal due to the need to have a mechanism in place to provide assistance to fellow states that are in need of response due to any biological incident. I think we can move to the next slide, please. And the following one, please. Next slide. Thank you. So the first bullet is actually the reference for the paper number if state parties or delegates want to have a look at the actual details of the proposal. But if we look at what Article 7 actually says, it's that there's a need to provide or support assistance in accordance with the United Nations Charter to any state party to the convention which so requests, if the Security Council decides that such a party has been exposed to danger as a result of a violation of the convention. But due to the fact that assistance is to be placed or provided as a result of a violation or deliberate use, the assistance provided in terms of this article should be humanitarian in nature. And that's a very important aspect. It should be humanitarian assistance. And next slide, please. Therefore, the request for assistance to be forwarded to the Security Council and the provision of assistance is dependent on a decision by the Security Council in terms of this article. But we must also remember that the article does not elaborate on investigations. This is to be considered in terms of Article 6 of the Convention. Next slide, please. But South Africa believes that there's three options when we consider how a state party should be provided with assistance. And we've elaborated on these in this slide. So the first option is bilateral assistance from other state parties or other states or international organizations such as the WHO or the OIE or FAO without invoking Article 7. The second option is assistance from other states parties, again without invoking Article 7. And states parties in a position to do so may provide assistance without Security Council approval. In this case, we can get an agreement at the review conference. And then, of course, the third option, which is stipulated in Article 7, assistance from the Security Council in accordance with Article 7. And in this case, if the request is approved by the Security Council, then states parties would be obliged to provide assistance. Next slide, please. So it is accepted that an investigation should follow the provision of assistance, but again, I must stress the primary objective of Article 7 is humanitarian in nature. Investigations of alleged use may take so long that the provision of assistance would be too long, and then when finally approved, it's just matched that it's time consuming. So investigations should not hamper the provision of assistance and the humanitarian objective of the article. Next slide, please. Therefore, South Africa proposed a set of guidelines to be followed in requesting assistance. So the information accompanying the request for assistance would be useful to states parties in preparation to provide the assistance, although such information should not be a prerequisite in provision of assistance. So if a country is in need, you shouldn't wait for this information. If you know what the country needs, go ahead and provide the assistance. In cases where assistance is requested from the Security Council, the information provided plays a crucial role in helping to make a prompt decision. The quicker the decision is made, the faster the assistance is provided, and the requesting process that's followed to apply for assistance by the state party, as well as the information provided, is the prerogative of the state party requesting the assistance. By that I mean is that how the request is made is up to you as a state party in how you request it. So the options are listed earlier. So if you decide to use one of the three options, whichever option you choose to use is up to you as a state party. So in the proposal that we presented, the working paper 3, we've listed information that should be provided in the request for assistance. So if you look at the proposal, there's information that should relate to the state party and key details of the event that has occurred. So when it happened, where it happened, what happened, the severity of the event, and this type of information would help in whomever is providing the assistance to make a decision on the mode of assistance that would be provided, the type and how fast to provide the assistance, etc. So that information is quite crucial, but as I mentioned before, they should not be a hindrance in how fast or what type of assistance is provided. Next slide, please. Command and control aspects, as Mr. Nakai mentioned earlier as well, is also quite important. So the principle is that the state party remains primarily responsible for the health care of its population. Hence, it should be in overall control of all response activities. But we should remember, in all cases, the sovereign national standing of a state party or of a country that is affected should be respected, and that country remains responsible or in control at all times. Next slide, please. So under command and control, the guidelines on the level of response would depend on, of course, the nature of the disease, the geographical area where the outbreak occurred, the status of public health system of the country, and potential of international effects. So it would be generally accepted that the health systems, the human, veterinary, plant systems of the state would always be the first line of response, and the response from others would be determined by these factors. And the involvement of international organizations, they would become involved at an early stage, but the country may request an international organization to assume control, or the country may stay in control and just let the international organizations be involved. So depending on the country itself. And next slide, please. So in terms of the way forward for this proposal, as was mentioned earlier, there has been widespread interest and meetings that was presented and discussed. And South Africa has taken note of the concerns raised for this proposal, such as the use of veto if a P5 country was alleged to have been involved in an attack. We've also taken note of suggestions that the BWC should have its own decision mechanism. But we can only decide on these issues if there's willingness for further discussion and cooperation on these issues. And we've also noted renewed interest to discuss the issues highlighted in the proposal due to the pandemic, but there's also a need to discuss these issues as well as other issues, so such as science and technology issues, such as vaccine development, which are important now for the pandemic, together with assistance and protection issues to ensure that there's coordination. We can't discuss such issues in silos. There needs to be coordination and coordinated efforts going forward, especially now that we are in such a situation. And despite all the challenges and deficiencies noted, South Africa is willing to work on Article 7 issues as well as other BWC issues in a synergistic manner with all countries to ensure that the humanitarian nature of this article, as well as other articles, are strengthened for the benefit of all. And an important issue that Ambassador Milo mentioned during the innovation dialogue that was held in August this year, he said that it is hoped that member states consider a wider acceptance of decisions that will position and strengthen the BWC in years to come. The pandemic should be a wake-up call for states to reach conclusions on historically outstanding issues of the BWC so that humanity can be assured that the BWC remains an instrument to safeguard humanity against biological threats. I think this is quite an important issue that he mentioned, and it's relevant for the current proposal, as well as the next topic that Ambassador Sharma is going to speak about in his presentation regarding the database that India and France put together. Because considering these issues have been under discussion for many years, we all need to work together and South Africa looks forward to cooperation with all countries on Article 7 as well as other BWC issues, so that we can look forward to working together in the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you for the additional consideration made to this proposal. Could I ask other speakers to be turned off? I just want a quick reminder that we need to make presentations within the time frame of maximum 10 minutes, so we can allow some time for Q&A. And I would like Mr. Nakai to invite the India and France proposal on the topic.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Kuzmarovska. And allow me to proceed to the next topic, database. India and France are proposing the development of Article 7 related assistance database. India, and they tabled the working paper upon it in 2015, which is revised in 2016. They are proposing the database to match specific offer and the needs for such international assistance. In MX4, we have witnessed widespread cross-regional support for this idea. And also we hear various voices that this idea deserves more discussions on technical, financial, and the operational aspect. Therefore, we are very grateful to hear the latest status of this proposal from India and France ambassadors. The proposal for voluntary fund for international assistance was also addressed. Today, we are very happy to have the ambassador from both countries to introduce the ideas. And if I may, can I ask French Ambassador Juan, to introduce your viewpoint?
Yes, good afternoon, colleagues, or good morning, and thank you very much for participating to this important webinar. I would like to very quickly also because we have short of time, to say that I'm very pleased to welcome Ambassador Kuzmanovska in our community, and thank you, Nakai, for moderating this webinar, and ISU for organizing this important seminar. I'm very happy to deliver this presentation on the implementation of a database under Article 7 with my very dear colleague, Ambassador Sharma. This has been an Indian-French initiative since the very beginning. I think it has been introduced in the BWC in 2015, 5 years ago already. And I'm very happy to present this initiative just after South Africa. And I agree with Melanie that our proposal is very complementary with the one you just heard. So first, I will be very short with the first slide, if ISU can move on the next slide, which is Article 7 quote of the BWC. Melanie already screened the exact quote language of Article 7. So I won't repeat it. It is widely recognized that international assistance should be considered in the case of a biological event. But I want also to stress that it would not necessarily need that a biological event need to be channeled through the BWC, as a biological event might not be due to a biological weapon per se. But it is clearly the case nowadays with COVID-19. Having said that, there is at this point one major lesson from COVID-19. It is that biological threats can be extremely disruptive for human societies. It is therefore very important to focus once again or pay particular attention on Article 7 and on the way to implement it in order to be ready if necessary. As Melanie said, the provision of Article 7 refer to the specific situation in which the Security Council has decided that a state party has been exposed to a danger as a result of a violation of the Convention. So in our views, it is very clear from the outset that Article 7 is one of the core provisions of the BW Convention, because it relates to a situation of a violation of an obligation by a state party. This article is the very starting point of the Indian-French proposal, and what our ambition is to propose to the international community and to the state parties, BWC state party community, a very practical and pragmatic way to implement efficiently Article 7. Next slide, please. Yes. So what is our reading of the Article 7 of BWC? And here again, I will be short because Melanie said what I wanted and what we wanted to say. Article 7 is a provision of collective security of the Convention. Therefore, we think that the negotiator of this important convention and on Article 7 saw the security of one party as the security of all parties, especially when potentially dealing with infectious pathogens. So Article 7 is also is really a provision of collective security, but is also a provision of and a clause of solidarity of the Convention. It implies that if requested, state parties assist each other, including for humanitarian needs. And finally, our reading on Article 7 is that Article 7 has a clear deterrent effect, as any hostile entity must know that an attack of one party is an attack on all, and that its target won't be left alone to fend for itself, but will receive assistance from fellow state parties. So now coming back, now if we move to our core proposal, and if you can move to the next slide, what are we proposing? We are proposing to set up a database on Article 7. Melanie said that Article 7 was never being used. And I think we have not spent enough effort to try to understand it fully. Till that date, indeed, there is no mechanism available for state parties to implement Article 7. What we are proposing, what we have proposed since 2015 already, is that the ISU establish a database administered and open to all state parties for assistance under Article 7. The purpose of this database will be solely to implement Article 7 and no other provisions, and to allow matching specific offers and requests for assistance. Setting up a database in this framework will not mean duplicating emergency assistance mechanisms already provided by other regional or international organizations or bilateral arrangements. It would cover both emergency assistance, containment measures, and recovery assistance. Furthermore, the establishment of this database would provide for a concrete incentive for universalization of this convention, because it would provide an operational and concrete tool to implement one of the key provisions. So if we can move now to the next slide, what would be the content and the rationale for this proposed database? The database would facilitate state parties to examine demands in accordance with domestic procedures and specific offers of assistance that could be required to assist the state parties. This may include one or more of the following capabilities. Firstly, what we are proposing is to include in this database what we call a non-monetary contribution. Among them, what we propose is to inject an expertise and information sharing, key inputs, notably for the deterrent effect touched earlier. Indeed, hostile entities must know that we have available mechanisms, the database, which channels on a voluntary basis the sharing of relevant expertise, that data and information, and help states parties to stand ready to any contingency. Secondly, what we propose is to include in this database a sort of mechanism to informations to be prepared to pre-exposures capacity building. Among them, protection and detection, relevant means available, including, for instance, preemptive training modules or population awareness and response. This is an important field as it allows achieving collective security envisaged by the Convention. Thirdly, what we proposed is to include in this database post-exposures response scenarios, namely decontamination, prophylactic or containment measures. And here again, this is a major field of capabilities for the database as it allows to build solidarity among state parties. We can, of course, consider other fields of assistance, but it's on these three clusters that we have initiated our reflections together with India. Next slides, please, on the modalities. You will see on this slide that we proposed that this database will be hosted by the BTWC website, and maintained by the ISU. It is already the case for the database assistance under Article 10. But what we propose is to have a separate database. Its purpose will be to provide a confidential clearinghouse for assistance requests and offers. It will be easily searchable for accessible to state parties, and could provide both for national point of contacts able to promptly examine demands in accordance with domestic procedures and specific offers to assistance. And additionally, we propose that a voluntary trust fund could also be considered for assistance under Article 7. Next slide, please. What advantages for this if we agree on such database? Among the numerous advantages that we see, we think that this database could provide training for containment measures or operational logistic aspect. In particular, it could provide a way to harmonize humanitarian response in post-event scenario. It is important also to highlight that the potential for coordination between international agencies and state parties could be enhanced with this database. And a final argument in favor of such proposal will be that this database will not require additional resources within the ISU, as it will mainly rely on the information provided by state parties. It could therefore be easily and quickly implemented. The way forward now, and it will be in the next slide. What we are planning to do with India is first to continue to working on a proposal, and we hope that it will be adopted by consensus, of course, and during the REFCON in 2021, and that this database will be fully implementable. In that perspective, we know that there is already databases in other international organizations from which we can derive inspiration. Therefore, in order to facilitate further substantive elaboration of this proposal at hand, India and France financed in the past a preparation of a comprehensive technical analysis. So we have a study which analyze other comparable database in multilateral settings and identify factors that have contributed to the effective use, as well as the shortcomings that should be avoided. Based on these findings of this study, recommendations will be made for the implementation of all proposed database under Article 7. Additionally, together with India, we are planning to organize a workshop on this proposal. This workshop will take place in the margin of the meeting of state parties, hopefully in April 2021, and probably in virtual mode. This workshop will discuss further the way to implement such an Article 7 database based on the recommendation from the study and lessons learned, and based on the feedback received from other state parties, of course. This is where we are. This is how we are planning to move forward on this proposal. I must say that I have to say that this proposal is not new, and it has enjoyed broad support by many countries. I have also to say, as I said at the beginning of this presentation, that this database is very complementary with other proposals formulated by other state parties, and we hope that at a certain point we be in a position to articulate possible common proposal to make this database a reality. Thank you very much. Now I will give the floor to my colleague Ambassador Sharma for additional remarks, and I will be available for questions and comments during the Q&A sessions. Thank you very much.
Ambassador Wang, thank you very much. Let me also thank Ambassador Kuzmanovska, Nakai-san, for co-chairing this panel, and as well as our appreciation to Mr. Daniel Feeks, fellow panelists and dear participants. Let me first explain you the background to the way we divided the presentation when Ambassador Wang and I discussed that how we are going to make today's presentation. I let Ambassador Wang present a multi-course meal like a fine French cuisine that we always get to experience and eat at his residence. And I told him that like all Indian dessert lovers, I would keep the dessert for myself. So here comes the dessert. But since Ambassador Wang has also not left any space even for dessert, I will have to make very brief remarks. I would like to draw upon some of the lessons from the Chemical Weapons Convention, particularly the Article 10 on Assistance Protection Database. And I've had the privilege and fortune of working in the OPCW years ago. Now, Chemical Weapons Convention entered into force in 1997, and by the time it entered into force, it had the benefit of learning from the implementation of the Biological Weapons Convention, which did not have detailed operational procedures and mechanisms to ensure that if an eventuality happens, there are procedures in place for seeking assistance, but providing and supporting assistance. And that's where this Article 7 database aspiration is. The objective of India-France joint proposal is to provide actually an operational blueprint for Article 7 so that we could have fully functional mechanisms and procedures to seek and provide assistance, very similar to Article 10 of the Chemical Weapons Convention. As he mentioned, this would cover pre-event requirements like human resource development, capacity building, understanding fundamentals of risk assessment, developing preparedness plans, guidelines, and regulations, and also a clear understanding of the operational response flow, as you heard from our colleague from South Africa, Ms. Melanie Redya. It can also be used for simulation and modeling for a fallout scenario, and channeling of assistance if such a scenario happens. Another very important benefit of this database will be the signaling effect it will have on operationalization of Article 10 of the BWC regarding cooperation and assistance, and also exploit the synergy between the two databases when in place. As Ambassador Wang mentioned, it would be useful to draw upon experience and operational knowledge from existing databases. For example, from the OPCW, from WHO, you have GOAN program, you have IMF Pandemic Assistance Program, and there's several others which we will also get to learn in the course of today's session. It is important to emphasize here that these assets and resources are already there. So we are not inventing them, they already exist. All we need is to aggregate them and put them in an accessible form. And having worked with Mr. Daniel Feeks in OPCW as a fellow colleague, I'm confident that we can leave this important task to Mr. Feeks and his colleagues from the BWC ISU. And he has our support, as well as the support of all of our fellow members in operationalizing Article 7 through this Article 7 database. I thank you for the attention and look forward to hearing from other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Ambassador Fan, Ambassador Sharma, to elaborate your joint proposal for Article 7 related international assistance. In this COVID-19 pandemics, all governments are struggling to address these enormous challenges, taking full advantage of available international assistance and cooperation. This will further reaffirm the value and importance of your proposal. Therefore, it is very useful to hear of this project prior to the MX4 meeting. Thank you very much indeed, ambassadors. Now, my microphone is back to you, Ambassador Kuznovskaya.
Thank you, Mr. Nakai. Thank you, Jan and Mr. Sharma, for the in-depth presentation. It really looks that we can have something concrete here by the next review conference, and I certainly hope that this will be the case. It's good to hear that work has been done in order to incorporate other existing projects and connect them to this stuff. Another idea that has been around for a certain period of time and it seems to have a widespread support is the idea presented by the Russian Federation, and is the idea about establishing biomedical units that could serve as a support to the implementation of Articles 6, 7, and 10 of the PWC. Anyhow, additional considerations were needed in order to examine this concept, how it could contribute to effective assistance, response, and preparation, with a review to enhancing the implementation of the convention itself. In this regard, I would like to invite Mr. Konstantin Borontsov, the head of the division for non-proliferation and arms control in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Russian Federation, to give his presentation. Konstantin, could you please take the floor?
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Your Excellency, Ambassador Kuzmanovska, Mr. Nakai, Mr. Fix, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank the UNODA and the BTWC ISU for organizing this webinar that gives us opportunity to exchange our views and to present some initiatives before the meeting of experts of the BTWC states parties, just to better understand what the proposals and ideas the states parties to the BTWC are discussing in the framework of the MX4. And we think that it is really a crucial time to organize this event, just to take this opportunity to discuss and consider these kind of ideas. In my intervention, I will touch upon the most significant aspects of one of the Russian initiatives discussed in the framework of the BTWC intersessional program of work, the concept of mobile biomedical units. The next slide, please. Russia submitted initial concept papers on this topic back in 2016 during preparations for the 8th BTWC review conference. This concept was developed on the basis of the functioning of the Global Outbreak Alert and Response Network, as well as Russian national experience in responding to the catastrophic consequences of the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. The next slide, please. At the invitation of one of the affected states, Guinea, Russian Federal Service for Surveillance on Consumer Rights Protection and Human Well-being, Rospotrebnadzor, sent its mobile laboratory and rapid response personnel to assist in mitigating and eliminating the consequences. This mission lasted more than a year and a half and confirmed that the availability of such capabilities at the international level, including in the area of prohibition of biological weapons, is extremely relevant and in demand. The use of biological weapons can be made covertly and disguised as a natural outbreak of infectious diseases that can result in an epidemic. All of this requires a significant public health response. Even with an effective control regime that is lacking in the BTWC, the risk of states and especially non-state actors trying to use biological agents as weapons cannot be completely ruled out. Thus, whatever the architecture of the BTWC implementation is, the ability to provide assistance and respond to bio-incidents should always complement measures to prevent them. In fact, they should act as additional guarantees in the event that the use of biological weapons cannot be prevented. In addition, they would be an effective tool for deterring a potential aggressor from using bioweapons. All of the above mentioned demonstrates the urgent need to establish a rapid response mechanism to provide assistance in accordance with Article 7 of the BTWC. The next slide, please. With regard to Article 7, states parties agreed that even with a strong national by-incident response capability, the affected state party may require additional international assistance. Such assistance should be provided promptly in order to cure the sick and prevent the spread of infectious diseases. Therefore, it is important to have a rapid response capability with an agreed mechanism for its use. Today, most BTWC states parties agree that mobile biomedical units can be a useful tool for the implementation of Article 7 in terms of training, assistance, and response. The next slide, please. An illustrative example of a wide category of mobile units is the specialized anti-epidemic brigades, so-called Spaps, of Rospotrebnadzor. As an integral part of the Russian anti-plague system, they have accumulated sufficient experience in monitoring, assessing, and responding to various conditions and situations, including emergency situations. Their operations are characterized by high mobility, self-sufficiency, multitasking, the use of high-tech equipment, compliance with biosafety standards, a modular principle of staffing, and diverse professional training of personnel. The next slide, please. The main activities of Spap include, first, laboratory diagnosis of infectious agents from human biomedical samples and analysis of environmental samples. Second, determining cause-effect connection of outbreaks of infectious diseases of various etiology. Third, development and implementation of emergency anti-epidemic measures. And fourth, temporary substitution of depleted local public health personnel in emergencies. The next slide, please. Each of the 5 Russian regional anti-plague institutes has 2 mobile biomedical units. The staff of one detachment is 35 people, heavy vehicles, including 6 specialized modules, including the BSL-free laboratory for the analysis of infected samples. The cost of acquiring a complete set of vehicles and equipment is approximately $3 million US, and annual maintenance costs are approximately $70,000 US. In addition to full deployment, we have also developed and operationalized a method for partially deploying team members to respond to public health emergencies. It allows for the selective deployment of personnel and laboratory support modules based on the nature of the specific situation. Russian anti-plague institutions have the capacity to train foreign personnel to work in public health in emergencies. Medical and biological rapid response teams from different countries differ in their composition, potential deployment capabilities. However, all teams in the rapid response to public health emergencies category can complement each other. The next slide, please. There are 2 options for implementing this concept. First, the participating states could centrally establish mobile units as a constituent element of the BTWC executive body. In this case, the recruitment and training of staff, the purchase of special equipment, the organization of work and storage sites, and the logistics of the program should be organized from assessed contributions based on the UN scale of assessments. This is undoubtedly an ambitious goal that requires determination and political will on the part of the participating states. Examples of such centralized capabilities are available in other relevant forums, in particular the OPCW Rapid Response Team. The second option, which is currently receiving more and more support, is of an intermediate nature. It provides for the creation by the BTWC states parties of their own biomedical units and their funding. At the same time, these units would be delegated to a specially created register or BTWC database under Article 7. In this case, the units on a daily basis would carry out national tasks, but if necessary, could be involved through the BTWC. Such activities could include conducting joint exercises and networking, familiarizing with equipment, sharing best practices and experiences, and at the request of a country providing assistance in building or developing relevant capabilities. Under this scheme, BTWC mobile units could be financed to a greater extent by voluntary contributions from interested states. The dispatch of these units to the affected region can be considered as fulfilling by the participating states of their obligations under Article 7 of the BTWC. Further promoting and facilitating dialogue on the use of mobile biomedical units is one of the few initiatives on which there is practically no disagreement among BTWC states parties. We are committed to further cooperation on this issue with all stakeholders. We look forward to consensus support for this initiative during the upcoming meetings of the BTWC experts, as well as adopt relevant recommendations at the BTWC meeting of states parties. All this would create a meaningful basis for making decisions on the implementation of this initiative within the BTWC at the 9th BTWC Review Conference in 2021. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vorontsov. Rapidity is certainly of key importance when dealing with either natural or deliberate outbreaks. And I would like to have a further discussion on this issue in the Q&A session. Now I would like to proceed on the final presentation in our agenda, and this is on the topic that certainly needs to be in the center of attention as well. And this is the possible use of biological agents against livestock, agriculture, and the natural environment. And in this regard, today we will hear from FAO's Emergency Management Center for Animal Health, addressing how to address preparedness and response to animal health emergencies from a global, multi-sectoral coordination approach. I would like to invite Mr. Ludovic Lee to give his presentation on this topic and on behalf of the Emergency Management Center for Animal Health in the FAO. Mr. Ludovic, could you please start the presentation?
Thanks a lot. Good morning and good afternoon. Thanks, Her Excellency Kuzmanovska, and for the organizer to give me the opportunity to present this topic. Next slide, please. I will present you the Emergency Management Center of the UNFAO that is addressing, as part of his missions, preparedness and response. We were created at the beginning for response only, but we shifted to preparedness and response to animal health emergencies using a multi-sectoral coordination approach. And I will discuss that during the presentation. Next slide, please. The MC was created in 2006 globally to respond to the avian influenza outbreaks, but then was modernized and rebranded in 2018 with a new strategic action plan that you can find online easily, and became the Emergency Management Center for Animal Health, switching the attention of the center for purely response to emergencies to more and more preparedness, but also increasing its missions in coordination of global events. Next slide, please. So what is the center? The center is quite particular within the FAO structure, as it is a mix of two divisions. The technical division, from where I reach, but I'm also actually part of the operation one as manager. But the technical one is providing veterinary support in assessing the situation, the event, the extent of the event, to see if that's an emergency or not, or if it's a threat for a country, with the operational arm of FAO, the Office of Emergency and Resilience, that provides its knowledge in terms of emergency operation, but also provides lots of support through funding to the center. And this center, therefore, is a mix of technical and operational capacities. Next, please. The four main pillars of the center, as through the strategic action plans, are based basically on the historical one, response, where we were sending rapid response mission on the field whenever there is a risk or an actual outbreak of disease, either purely animal or zoonotic disease, through our partnership with WHO and OIE, and also through the increased preparedness activities in terms of training and workshop of countries to better be prepared to response to emergency. The aspect of the pillar that is more interesting to the group today is the increased activities of the center in coordinating events at the global level through a USAID BHA fund and gathering different partners such as OIE WHO for animal and public health, but also the food security cluster, other UN cluster like the health cluster, the International Agency for Atomic Energy, the World Veterinary Association, LVSF, the private sector, to mention some of them. Next slide, please. So this is a quick picture of when we were able to meet together in a room about discussing COVID-19, actually, before COVID-19 became such a global issue. Next slide, please. As an emergency unit, we also work on streamlining the way of working in order to make sure that we do things according to a clear role and responsibility way, as per the incident coordination system, ICS principle, and everyone in the team is quite aware of role responsibilities whenever we have an incident coordination group involved in any of the work of the center. Next slide, please. So basically, in a nutshell, an incident coordination group basically is using EMCH platform as a platform to gather OIE and WHO, our main partner in coordination, but also other partner to provide support to regions or national levels in terms of communication, resource mobilization, sometimes even emergency missions, following the down to up information on the situation, needs, and requests for response and preparedness activities. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the incident coordination groups, they happen every Thursday for an hour with rotating subjects, is to set an overall strategy between our partners on how best jointly address requests from countries. And in doing so, we align efforts of the different partners and try to avoid any duplication of activities. It also promotes the coordination and collaboration, but also the knowledge sharing, because we have some, in the world, some regions that are more advanced, or due to the history of previous outbreaks, they have already materials that are fully available for other regions. And through the ICG, we saw an increased exchange of information and of good practice between regions of the world. And also, this is really important because the ICG ensure coordination, not only coordination, but also the delivery of consistent messages between the different partners to ensure that we take into account the different aspects of the multi-sectoral coordination. The ICG is also using emergencies, is using more and more, will be using, sorry, an emergency management platform that is being developed under the USAID BHA funding that allows us to follow events, incidents, and develop action plans to better coordinate and manage events. Next slide, please. This is a quick picture of the latest incident coordination group the EMCH has been involved in with other partners, such as WHO and OIE and the others that I mentioned earlier. And they all show a different aspect of the impact of the ICG. The one in yellow is the one that was created for African swine fever, which is a disease with high impact on livelihood in Asia. This ICG was to coordinate the different activities in the region. The clear pink one was for lumpy skin disease, another disease that is threatening livelihood in the region, in which we had a huge input from the regional European office that has a lot of experience and material that provided his knowledge and expertise to countries that were in need of, in front of this upcoming threat to their borders, such as Myanmar, for example, and led to a remote assistance from the Center on Risk Assessment related to LSD introduction and spread in the country. The dark pink was an incident coordination thematic on Rift Valley fever, a zoonotic disease that can lead to death in humans, a fever, hemorrhagic fever type symptoms. And this led to better coordination, messaging, but also led to the deployment of 2 missions in Djibouti and in Uganda on the disease, and an upcoming one in Mauritania next week. The blue Central Africa color is related to how an ICG can gather information from an event in which we lack information to have a better assessment of the situation. We had at the time information that lots of equine were dying, and we were capable of grasping a better picture of what was happening in the field and provide better assistance to 2 countries to increase the preparedness and response to equine disease. And the last one, but not the least one, is the COVID ICG, in which we had an increased link between WHO, IE, and FAO in messaging related to COVID and animal health, in order to make sure that the message through the public was well received and well designed between the two organizations. Next slide, please. And really quickly, and I see the time is running, I will have how the EMC, through the ICG, through the response and preparedness activities, is also participating into this really interesting for the group today project funded by Canada on building resilience against agrotourism and agrocrime, especially for animal health, in which the FAO through the EMC is working on the implementation of the project with OIE, and also Interpol. And I forgot to mention that Interpol was also a member of the incident coordination meetings that we have weekly. Next slide, please. So the 3 organizations have different roles in the implementation. I think we can click on the, yes. So basically we have OIE as project governance and relationship with donors, Interpol with the link with the security forces in country, increases the awareness of the issue and support through a workshop on bioterrorism, and FAO that is also leading main activities on the field for the 3 phases that we'll be presenting in the next slide. Next slide, please. Yes, thanks a lot. The 3 regions of interest for this project, the project is looking into a first phase of assessment of current situation in the region of color and presenting on this slide. Then we'll train and build capacity through a workshop of good emergency management practice, but also through simulation exercise. And sorry, the phase 3 will be to test and exercise on the training and building capacity through simulation exercise. Next slide, please. And this slide is a summary of what will be happening, assessment of the country capacity through, I think if we click, we may have something else happening. Yes, through the surveillance evaluation tool of FAO that we look into the surveillance capacities of the country, especially through a new added biothreat model. Next click, please. Case definition, alert and triggers through the good emergency management practice, in which we also had an addition on biothreat module. This will feed into the legal and institutional framework needed to ensure any biothreat in the country. And this will be also tested through simulation exercises. Those are the expected outputs of the project. Next slide, please. And I think that will be almost the last one. If you want to have any more information on the presentation, you'll have the presentation available, but you can Google EMC Emergency Management Center for Animal Health. You will have the strategic plan freely available, as well as the annual report that is produced during our steering committee meeting, and the one pager that are produced by the center regarding activities on the incident coordination group, especially the one with a specific focus, on COVID-19. And the last slide. Thanks a lot for your attention. And if you want to join the EMC or join myself through email, you have the credential information on this slide. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Trees. It is indeed very useful to hear the activities and experience of your organizations. Yes, actually, we tend to focus our attention to the malicious use of biological pathogens against human beings. But at the same time, considerable attention is given to such uses against livestock, agriculture, and natural environment. Since it gives enormous damage to our world. Therefore, it is very important to hear your briefings before the start, prior to the next discussion. Thank you very much indeed. And now we have concluded the successful presentation of all the successful presentations, and I'd like to once again sincerely appreciate all those presenters to squeeze time for us and to share your viewpoints and information expertise with us. In putting Article 7 into operations, database and guideline is something that we have to work upon. And taking into consideration the actual level of national capacity of most of the member states parties of BWCs, additional in-presence assistance, such as the mobile unit, it deserves a serious consideration. Importance of those proposals are further reaffirmed in the wake of the COVID pandemic, in which we are struggling, how best we should deal with the situation. It is indeed grateful to hear once again about the proposal before the meeting. And also, currently we are overwhelmed with the COVID-19. But remember the damage caused by foot and FFP disease or bird flu influenza, which caused enormous economic business confusion damage. Therefore, in MX4, malicious use of biological agent on livestock and agriculture was an important topic. It was indeed useful to refresh our discussion through the presentation of FAO. Once again, allow me to express a sincere appreciation to Melanie-san, Ambassador Vance, Ambassador Sharma, Constantine-san, and Mr. Tree, to take part in these discussions and to share your experience. どうもありがとうございました。Microphone is back to you, Ambassador Kuzma.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your presentations. As you can see, we are almost reaching the time limit of the webinar. Nevertheless, as always, making Article 7 operational raises interest and a lot of questions. And we have received rather large number of questions. Before I proceed with them, I would like to note that we will share the issues raised and questions with the participants and hope that the discussions can continue in the MX4 meeting because they reflect what are the current concerns and issues about the different topics. Anyway, I will pose one question for each presenter, and if the audience allows it, we will break the time limit very shortly. So I will just list the questions, not to lose time, and let everyone answer one after another. So I will start with Melanie, and I would like to hear from her about further elaboration on the relationship between Article 6 and Article 7 as she sees it, because she briefly mentioned in her presentation that there is a connection. After that, I would like to invite Ambassador Wang and Ambassador Sharma to give a brief comment on how they see that their project and the study they are delivering will go beyond the drawbacks that the matchmaking of offers and requests for assistance that has been tried by the UN SCR 1540 committee and that proved to be suboptimal. So how do they believe their system will overcome this? Any comment, very brief, about the idea of the voluntary fund that is being discussed about implementing Article 7 will be also welcome. I would like to ask Mr. Voronsov if he could give us some insight from deployment of the biomedical units during the course of COVID-19 pandemic, and if he has some lessons learned from that experience to share with us that are with relevance to the BWC. And finally, I would ask Mr. Ludovic if he can share with us if there are plans to extend the joint project with Interpol on building resilience against agroterrorism also to other regions, and how could interested state parties join the initiative. So in the order that I pose the questions, could you please give me some brief answers? Thank you. Melanie?
Thank you, Ambassador. In my presentation, I mentioned that the request for assistance should be forwarded to the Security Council, and the provisions for assistance should not be dependent on the investigation, because investigations should be undertaken in terms of Article 6. And Article 6 will primarily concentrate on investigations, and we shouldn't look at the provision of assistance would not be dependent on investigations, because primarily Article 6 would concentrate on investigations, and that is the article in the convention that looks at, if you look at Article 6 of the convention, it says any state party to the convention which finds that another state party is acting in breach of the convention may lodge a complaint with the Security Council or the United Nations, and such a complaint would include all possible evidence of confirming its validity, as well as a request for its consideration by the Security Council. So that is a completely different aspect in terms of what we are looking at in terms of Article 7. So in this particular instance, we want to consider whether there's been deliberate use or there's been an attack with biological weapons. So in this particular case where we have now a COVID-19 incident where a country is in need and is in distress, we need to assist a state party that is in distress. So the basic consideration that we need to look at in terms of Article 7 is, as I mentioned in a number of instances in my presentation, humanitarian assistance. So Article 6 would be investigation of alleged use, and it's, as I said, we can consider those instances under Article 6. So we can consider that separately. But in terms of the proposal and in terms of the guidelines that we've proposed in terms of Article 7, we can consider those issues separately and look at purely the humanitarian assistance that needs to be provided in a state party under distress and consider purely those instances. So we can look at those two articles separately and consider the humanitarian assistance under Article 7 separately. I hope that has been sufficient in a brief answer. Thank you, Chair.
For a brief answer, yes. For the MX4, we'll elaborate in more detail. Thank you, Mr. Sharma, please.
Thank you.
Ambassador Kuzmanovska, thank you very much for that question. In fact, if we look at the purpose of the UN Security Council Resolution 1540, it is to prevent non-state actors to be able to use weapons of mass destruction for terrorist purposes, and therefore states are required to enact appropriate laws and also adopt effective measures to prevent terrorists from doing so. As Ambassador Wang had explained in his presentation, that if we have such a database, it would have a deterrent effect, and that would help states parties have in place effective measures to prevent any potential biosecurity incident. And Biological Weapons Convention, in any case, the implementation of BWC is an integral component of the UN Security Council Resolution 1540. In fact, states are required to provide reports to that effect, how effectively they have been implementing the Security Council Resolution 1540 in terms of BWC, CWC, and many other conventions and treaties in that regard. And therefore, we deduce from the Security Council resolution that effective implementation of BWC is essential for realizing the objective and purpose of Security Council Resolution 1540. And in that framework, once we are able to put an Article 7 database, it would certainly contribute to the achievement of 1540 objectives. That in brief would be my response. And I'm sure that Ambassador Wong would like to supplement the answer.
Thank you, Pankaj. Exactly. So Pankaj had the dessert, but also the coffee and tea. No, just to say that it's exactly what I wanted to say, but just to complement what Pankaj has just mentioned and stressed. I think what we have in mind in terms of the challenge before us, if state parties decide to set up such database, is really to make sure that this database will be updated on a regular basis, fed on a regular basis, because otherwise it won't be efficient. We need a good offer assistance in the multiple capabilities that I mentioned in my presentation. So an efficient database, and it was the lessons that we draw from other comparable databases in other international organizations, is that it is efficient if state parties play the game and feed database with all relevant information needed by states, a state party who could be in a difficult situation. So it's not what I wanted to say in different terms is that it's not easy. We don't underestimate the challenge to have an efficient database, but we do think that it's feasible if there's a common interest to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Wang. Konstantin, could you please go on before I make the final comment?
Yes, first of all, thank you for the question. What about COVID-19 and biomedical units? I'd like to make just brief first comment that if we are talking COVID-19 in relation to the BTWC, so we can consider this issue not in the framework of the Article 7 of the BTWC, because as some other briefers presented this article, it relates to the cases when the Security Council decides that the state's party has been exposed in danger as a result of violation of the convention. But taking into account the natural origins of the COVID-19, it is not possible, and it could not be considered in the framework of the Article 7. But instead of that, it could be considered in the framework of the Article 10 about the international cooperation. And in this case, it could be also possible to consider the possibility to use the biomedical units in the framework of the BTWC as an instrument to fulfill the obligations under the Article 7 of the BTWC in order to prevent, to make the assistance and to prevent the repetition of this kind of outbreaks in order to strengthen the implementation of the BTWC. As for the question about when the biomedical units were used to counter COVID-19 outbreak, I'd like just to mention a few examples that our biomedical units under the management of our Federal Service for Surveillance on Consumer Rights Protection and Human Well-being were used either internally on the territory of the Russian Federation or in the territory of some our close neighbors, such as, for example, in Tajikistan, in Kyrgyzstan, and some other neighbor countries, as well. So it was used in a very effective manner, and these biomedical units proved their efficiency. With regard to countering this COVID-19 pandemic. As for the cooperation with some other countries for implementing biomedical units at the international level, we would like to say that we are carrying out this kind of cooperation or interaction with other interested countries in order to strengthen the cooperative response and assistance to different outbreaks and epidemics. And we are absolutely open to further possible cooperation with all the interested countries for using and implementing these biomedical units together, and we are absolutely open for any assistance to the countries in need. Thank you.
Thank you, Konstantin. Just one brief mention as a personal observation that yes, it is true that COVID-19 is a natural outbreak, but I think that in our further discussions we should think about the importance of rapidity when taking action, no matter whether it is case of natural outbreaks or some delivery effects. So just as food for thought for further discussions, I believe that we should give a talk about the importance of the rapidity of the response mechanism in all cases. And finally, I would like to ask Ludovic to give his comments on the question.
Thanks a lot, Excellency. To the question about extending the joint project to other regions, due to the budget constraint, we identified those three regions with 1 and 2 main pilot countries we identify to pilot this first phase of the project. The project already triggered interest from other parts in the world, like the Central and South America region, in which some of the tools that have been developed under the project and through other projects funding the center are being translated in Spanish while we're speaking on the project. For the future, if in the likely chance to have a phase 2 of this project, we would use the outcome of this first phase, which is a roadmap for follow-up, to use the good practice and knowledge acquired in this first phase and apply it to other regions of the world, knowing that interest from countries is always welcome through national request. And then, of course, the application of this project or future activities depends also on funding available. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you, Ludovic. Thanks, everyone. I'm really sorry that our Q&A session is rather short. I apologize if all comments are, we're not able to deliver all comments, but I want to thank all the participants and once again, Mr. Nakai and the Secretariat for conducting such an important informal discussion on the topics that we will be discussing further on in the MX4. Thank to all participants for their attention and for their questions, and looking further. I hope you all stay in good health, and thanks once again. Have a good afternoon.